Versus Management. I'm Iain Strahan, and I'm here to guide you through the stuff that I've learned in the last few years around leadership and management. So, as always in my events, I'm hoping that you guys are going to get somewhat involved in the conversations we're having as I try and impart some knowledge. So, just to check with you guys now, you can see the slide on the screen and you can hear my voice. So hands up if you can see the slides. Thank you, and hands up if you can hear my voice. Super, thank you very much. So all the systems seem to be working. That's always a great start. So, still letting people in the room. So let's those. Cool. So how have we come to this subject today? So I've spent a number of years working with a lot of business owners to grow their business and develop, well, basically their dream and where they want to be with their business. And as we've grown business owners, we've increasingly got to see that management is a really, really key part of that. But unfortunately, in the last kind of 10 or 20 years, it seems like management has become like the poor relation of leadership. And from everything I've done, that isn't the way we need to be running stuff. So I really wanted to dig into today, right? That change that's kind of happened, maybe even since Margaret Thatcher was in charge, and the whole thing around Austin, Leyland, and what's great management and what's bad management, and how management got a bad name, and how we now get to the point of leadership being the key phrase and the actual golden rule. I want to start breaking that down a little bit. It's interesting as well. The last great book that was written on management, in my opinion, was The 1 Minute Manager. And the great book by Ken Blanchard, The 1 Minute Manager and The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. That was the last great book that was written on management, and that was back in the 80s. What's happened since then? I want to break that down for you guys today, talk through the learnings that we've had in 30 years working on this stuff in ActionCOACH and where we've got to with that and what actually works really, really well. But I think before we get into that, I want you guys to do a little bit of work for yourselves. So as you've come into this now, I want you to think, what is it you want? We're going to have, well, hopefully it's about 45 minutes together. I'm going to limit it down. It's not going to be a full hour. We're going to try and finish off in 45 minutes, race through this, get you as much imparted as possible. But what is it you want to take away from today? What do you want from today? What learnings, what benefit? What do you want to profit? How do you want your people or your knowledge to benefit from that? So stick it in the chat, stick it in your own notes, make your own notes, whatever it takes, just to then to let me know. What is it you want to get from today? Because I've spent 8 years with ActionCOACH now, learning and evolving this stuff. There is so much to learn around management. There's so much that we can bring to this piece. Let me just have a look. So my background is an engineer, and I've been growing businesses for myself and for others for the last 30 years. And I came to the ActionCOACH piece because there's so much value in here. And this is something I've worked up together with Brad Sugars, the guy that founded ActionCOACH, in terms of, right, this is what leadership and management is. And I think as we head into that, as you write down what it is that you want from today, as you decide what value you want to take from today, what it is you want to know about leadership versus management, you write down your goals, get clarity, because the more clarity you have around what you want to achieve from today, the more you'll take from it. For me, the interesting question is, are great leaders born or are great leaders made? Is it nature or is it nurture? Do some people pop out of the womb and they're going to be great leaders? Did Winston Churchill step into this world born to be, destined to be a great leader? In fact, did Hitler head into this world to be a great leader? Or were they skills that they learnt and developed? The more that you study Hitler, for instance, the more you learn that he really did develop those skill sets. He really did develop the skill sets to learn to address the crowd, to bring a crowd on board. Winston Churchill, the same. Really interesting. So from your opinion, are leaders born, or do leaders learn and grow their skill set? What's your thoughts? I mean, by all means, stick it in the chat. What do you think the answer to that is? Are leaders born, or are the leaders grow into that role? Just fetching the chat, so anybody wants to pop on, have a chat can do. So thank you very much for your input in the chat there, guys. That's great to see that engagement. Thank you very much indeed. So looking at leaders versus managers. So as I've worked with ActionCOACH in the last 8 years, we've come up with kind of like these 7 keys to a winning team. These are the 7 keys of leadership and management that work really, really well. And I'd like you guys to run through this list of 7 keys and score for yourself. How much of this is leadership and how much of this is management? And we'll run through that with you as we go forward. See if I can just mute a few people as we just run through this. Excuse me, guys. Bum, bum, bum. Just mute yourselves. That'd be great. So score yourself through that. Right. So my thoughts on that. Obviously, the first one, strong leadership. That is definitely a leadership skill. I think that was an obvious answer. A common goal. Where does that come from? Common goal is obviously, in my world, that also comes from great leadership, and that should run through and be coordinated with management. And the rules of the game, the culture of a business, that also comes through leadership, but then becomes a management function because everybody in the organization has to live and demonstrate and demonstrably live the culture of the business. Then we dive down a little further and get to the action plan. Oh, that really is a management function. The action plan is the day-to-day of what we're going to achieve, what we're going to do in the business, who's going to achieve what. That's absolutely a management role. Then as we've got rules of the game, a common goal, got an action plan in place, so we have to assume that people, then when they've got that autonomy, they're going to do some stuff wrong. We have to assume then that we've got enough stuff in place, but stuff is going to go wrong. And there needs to be a management role around, right? When things go wrong around us, when we're trying to do the right stuff, but the wrong stuff happens, then how do we handle that off? And that's a management role we're going to dig into in quite a lot of detail today. Then we speak about communication over and over again. The communication piece is going to come through, and that runs right the way through for me. That's from leadership, that flows right the way through management, and the management role is to ensure that communication is 100%. And then we get down to the real gem of management skill that's missing today is that personal and professional development. How do we conduct regular reviews, like weekly reviews, with each member of our team so they feel valued and they feel that we're growing them as people? Because when we go back to Maslow's fundamental needs, one of those fundamental needs is the need to grow. When we feed that particular fundamental need, people stay with us for longer. So I run through that list and see there's a real blend there of leadership and management. You see, in my world, great leaders build great employees. If you want great people, you've got to be a great leader. Great people don't want to work for an average leader, and great people don't want to work for an average company. Great people want to work for great companies that are achieving great people. Now, I reckon only about 20% of the people around me actually, in my business, I actually want to aspire to that level of growth and development. But if you build great people, they will build a great business. And great leaders also retain great employees. They don't just recruit them, they don't just find them, but they build them, they train them, and they keep them. Much like we do with the best customers, we find them, we build them, we train them, they keep them. And that today, for me, is a combination both of management and leadership. And then in order to achieve that retention, I bring into a third term. And that's where I came from when I joined the coaching fraternity. Is there's a third term there, not just of leadership and management, but of coaching. Because nobody's going to achieve their best. In fact, nobody's going to achieve their best unless they're coached, unless they're challenged. In my coaching sessions, when a client comes to me with an aspiration or a goal, I've got to challenge them. I've got to get them to explore that goal they're setting themselves. Why is it that number? Should it not be a half of that number? Or should it not be 10 times that number or 100 times that number? In fact, if it was 100 times that number, what would you do differently right now? That challenge, that's what that challenge and that pressure to perform is what gets the very, very best out of people. So like Bob Nardelli said, unless coached, people will not achieve their maximum capability. And that's our role as managers, to actually develop skill sets for coaching as well. So what's coaching? Well, for me, coaching is very much about asking great questions. Great questions lead people to the great outcomes that drive them forward. So then I look at the teams and the organizations that I've worked with and that I've built through the years, and I see that I got management and leadership in combination in all those organizations. But in the best organizations, those are different people. I have somebody that wants to sit at the top of the tree, wants to drive, wants to have that leadership piece, where they've got, as one of my coaches likes to put it, it's the giraffe perspective, head up above the trees, looking into the distance at the opportunities and the dangers in front of them. That's the role of leadership, to enroll and inspire. And then I have somebody else in the organization who is management. And management is almost like an administrative role. It's almost like a coordination role. Less about having great vision, but more about actually measuring some numbers and looking after people really, really, really well. Two completely different personalities that turn up. And we contrast that back into one of the common models that I use over and over again in ActionCOACH. And one of the great tools from ActionCOACH, above and below the point of power. That point in the middle of that text there is the point of power. And the role of management is to get away from blame, excuses, and denial. Management is the constant and ever-present task of driving out blame, excuses, and denial in an organization. You see, when anything goes wrong in an organization, it's really easy to find somebody to blame or to make an excuse or to deny it ever happened. And those are just giving away power, energy, and control to the universe. Great management drives people to take responsibility, to be accountable, and to have ownership. And great leadership is about having ownership. So examples of that, for instance, would be perhaps when you've got the member of the team that's always been a star performer in the team. Let's flick back to that slide again, because it's a really useful slide. Imagine that star performer in the team. I had a guy once, an absolutely brilliant sales guy. And he was brilliant, but for years and years and years. And then his performance tailed off. But because he'd always been brilliant, we kind of kept him in the organization. And after a while, it came to the point I had to have a conversation with this guy and say, you used to be our greatest salesman, but I'm not seeing that anymore. We need to have a conversation about what's going on here. Because up until that point, I'd been denying that this guy wasn't performing. And we had to have that frank conversation. He still thought he was a great salesman, and we had to look at the numbers and point out where the problems were. And we have to frame a conversation at that point around, right, in order to move forward from here, how do we make that work? Let's come back to that. Let's circle back to that. Because we look at that above and below the point, it's worth thinking for yourself. Above the point, that's where leadership lives. It's worth rating yourself again. In terms of those 6 points in your management style, or in the style of the managers you know in your businesses or businesses you work with, rating them. How much do they create denial in that organization? How much do they create excuses? How much do they create blame? And what would they score themselves in their ability to get people to take responsibility in their role? What's their ability to get people to be accountable to their role and take leadership? Score yourself, score the people you work with, and then look at, right, so what's the actions that arise out of that? Because in your organization, it's a blend of leadership and management. It's about getting people above that point of power. Rate your team, put them on a chart. And sometimes, when you do that putting people on a chart, it's like drawing. One of my coaches has a diagram of a rowing boat with every team member with a set of oars. Who's rowing forwards, pushing in the same direction for the same goal that you're rowing? Who is in the team that's rowing in the opposite direction? Because if we row in the opposite direction, you have to have somebody else rowing in the right direction. And how many people are resting on their oars? Sometimes you're going to draw a diagram, just put names to it. Then we have to get back into that management skill. And this is the bit that gets really interesting. And what's really troubled us, we've gone through this management. It's really, really easy for a manager to actually create denial. How do we do that? That rock star employee that I used to employ once upon a time used to be brilliant in the organization. When I finally fired him, the rest of the team said, well, thank God you got rid of him. And I was like, what the hell? Why did you guys not mention this? We thought you knew. And because I let this guy get away with it, these guys had freewheeled themselves. That culture, that bad apple culture, had permeated through the whole organization. And in future, and every time after that, whenever I've seen that that lack of performance, that falling away, I've decided I've got to call it. I've got to get all the information together. I've got to get my ducks in a row. I've got to have KPIs set and watch where people are falling back from their KPI, provide the evidence to be able to sit down and have that conversation and say, look, you used to be absolutely brilliant in this role. And I can really see you can be great in this role again. But in order to get to that position, here's the list of things that you need to do in order to get back to there. And in order to get those great KPIs, those great performance characteristics back again, you're going to report to me on a daily basis of what you're going to do next day. What are going to be your KPIs for the next day? What's going to be your actions for the next day? And every time I've done that since then, I found around about 20% of the people I do it with actually step up and go, hell yes, you're right, Iain. I have been slacking and I really need to pick up my game. And about 20% of the people will pull up and will improve their game and really step up and become that rock star performer again. And those are brilliant instances. And it's like we've switched the light back on and found some great people again. But that does mean that 80% of them, actually, when we said, right, you're going to write down your list of jobs for tomorrow, you're going to write down your KPIs for tomorrow, and you're going to live up to them. About 80% of them said, hell no, I'm not doing that. And then I had to just hand them a pencil and paper, hand them a pen and paper, go, well, in that case, I'll accept your resignation right now. And sit there in silence while they write their resignation. It's tough, it's hard, but the evidence has to be there. You have to have absolute conviction to do that. That's where so management was to be able to confront the situation and then be able to remove that. Because if we don't, we create denial, and then it's not manageable. The same runs with blame, and I see this so often in management these days, creating blame. It's so easy to do. It's the questions we ask. I got home the other day and the table wasn't set for dinner. I said, who's supposed to set the table? And both my kids went, it was them. Of course they did. What a stupid question to ask. Who was going to do that? Who was supposed to do that? How quickly do we kill trust by asking who was supposed to do that? We know the answer. We know who's supposed to do it, and they know they're supposed to do it. So what do we do? How do great managers handle that situation? Well, great managers don't ask who questions. They ask forward-facing, action-orientated questions. So what is it we need to do in the next 10 minutes in order to resolve this situation? Look how that question is forward-facing. We're not looking for blame. In the heat of the moment, we can't go looking for blame. In the heat of the moment, we need to be looking at a forward-moving question. So what is it that we can do in the next 10 minutes? What 3 things can we do in the next 10 minutes to resolve this situation? And amazing things happen when we ask those questions, because automatically we start to build trust. People understand that we trust them to move forward. We trust their decision making. We trust their ability to move forward. We have confidence in them, and therefore they'll have confidence in us. And exactly the same thing happens with creating excuses. If you want to create an excuse from a member of your team, ask them why. Why didn't you do that? Why did that happen? And they will come with a list of excuses and reasons why that happened. Imagine asking instead, so what are we going to do to resolve this? What 3 ideas have you got to resolve to do this? That moves people forward. It gives them trust, gives them empowerment. It takes them from below that point of power, looking at blame, excuses, and denial, and takes them up on top of that point of power to actually take responsibility for the situation. I also find that in creating excuses, that sometimes it's a lack of skill set on our own part. So when I was in the engineering business, and I've been an engineer for 30 years, there wasn't much I didn't know about manufacturing. If I walked on the shop floor and I could see something going off, I was asking, so what are we going to do here? I would know what the answer was. But if I walked into the accounts department, where my skill set was not so strong, and asked, so what are we going to do here? then I would be susceptible to more blame, excuses, and denial. So sometimes we need to grow our skill sets, our technical expertise, as well as understanding how to ask great questions. Sometimes we do accept excuses for things we don't understand as much. But that then leads to that management in the moment thing. When it's all going wrong around us, it's so easy to ask a what. It's so easy to ask a why question or a who question. And the timing is absolutely critical. In the moment, when emotion is high and logic is low, when the guys on the shop floor know they've done something wrong, when the guys in the office know they've done something wrong, and their emotion is high because they know when they've done it wrong, at that moment is not the moment to ask a why or a who question. That's the moment to ask a what do we do to move this forward question. When the emotion has died down, when the heat has gone out of the situation, is the time to sit down in a room and in a balanced and a safe environment, discuss what went wrong there. Where did we go wrong? And what do we do in future that we don't have that situation again? And then we can start to conduct the post-mortem of what went wrong. And perhaps then who didn't step up, who missed a beat, and how they came to miss a beat. So time is absolutely critical. I used to have a boss when I worked in engineering. I had a boss who was absolutely, every week we used to have a progress meeting, and he would almost like he'd absolutely select somebody who was going to tear a strip off on a weekly basis. And that built such an atmosphere of distrust in the organization. He'd turn up on the shop floor if things weren't very nice, and he'd rant and he'd rage at what was going on around him. And that doesn't work, because at that moment, everybody's got their chimp running around in their mind. They're looking to be defensive and move forward. We've all seen that manager. We've all had that manager. And remember, people don't leave bad businesses. They leave bad managers. That manager of mine all those years ago, we left in droves because the atmosphere was so toxic. Great people leave bad managers. So in the moment, how do you move it forward? How do you move the situation forward to build trust, to build confidence, to ensure the team around us know that we have confidence in them? Well, that's kind of like leading with some responsibility. You see, when we went through the last kind of 20 years when management's been getting a bad name, if management got a bad name, micromanagement got an even worse name. It's like, we've got to let people do their own thing. We're great leaders now. We don't tell people what to do. I've got to say, that's got to be one of the most damaging strategies and philosophies I have ever seen in business. Of course, people need telling what to do. Sometimes you get a new employee in the organization. It's like having a new child. It's like bringing a baby into the world. Of course, you've got to look after them. They don't know what to do. And the only way they will get to know what to do is if you tell them step by step what to do. Now, if you had an employee and he's been there for 5 years and you're still telling him step by step what to do, well, either there's something wrong with the employee or there's something terribly wrong with your management strategies. But at some point, there has to be some micromanagement. If you're giving somebody a new task, a new role, a new job, they're going to have micromanagement. They're going to have to be micromanaging, told step by step what to do in the role. And then they need to grow into that role. And this is the coaching piece. It's how often do we need to describe what the role is in detail and get them to document, help and grow around that, get to the point where they can start to ask you questions and you can start to ask them questions around that role. Basically, for the team around us, we want them to be self-managing for about 80% of the time and coming to us for about 20% of the decisions. Remember, we don't want our team coming to us for decisions. We want them making their own decisions. We want to empower them and educate them sufficiently that they can make their own decisions at least 80% of the time. That means they need to know how to do a good job. They need to know what success looks like, which is why KPIs are so important. That is what success looks like. And when they get to that stage where you don't need to manage them as a manager, when they can self-manage, that's the point at which they become promotable. And so often in business these days, The point of promotion comes when we need to move them forward. And that's when so many managers fail, because it's only when they can make those decisions for themselves that actually they are promotable. So understanding the difference between being able to micromanage and taking them through the situational management loop, it's definitely worth searching up through that point where we do the micromanagement, and then we get to the point of being able to instruct, and then they can be coached, and then they can be delegated to. Promotion doesn't occur until they can self-manage. So what about working with accountability? Accountability is putting those KPIs in place for people, offer numbers in the business, offer tasks and roles. You want around about 20% of your team will rise up and run themselves according to the KPIs and the role you put in place for them. Only about 20% of the people around you will achieve that. But in order for them to achieve that, you've got to give them those targets. You've got to give them those goals. You've got to give them those KPIs. They have to know what success looks like in their role. And then it's the opportunity to enable them, empower them, to let them drive that forward, to learn their own autonomy. And those KPIs have to be challenging. I don't know how many of you guys are in sports teams or play sports of some form, but have you noticed how much better you perform when you're playing against a good team or a good opponent? Don't you step up? Well, I love working out at the gym. I love my own time at the gym. But if I want a really good workout, I stand alongside a PT and he kicks my ass. And I will do so much better and ache for so many days more for having somebody accountable. Yeah, is it 10 reps? Yeah, but another 2 reps. Oh, you got another 5 reps on that? Yes, again, that pushes you forward. That pressure performance curve. How do we provide the optimum pressure to drive people forward? That's about the numbers and being held accountable to that number. That's the leadership team. That's working with the team to get them to their maximum opportunity and manage them through it. So what's the ownership piece? You see, the ownership piece is something which so many businesses are missing out on in the modern world. The ownership piece is, how do you get your team on board for your vision and your mission of what it is you want to achieve? If you own a company that makes widgets that put the end on shoelaces, it feels like it's difficult to find a mission for that business. But until you work out what that business is there to achieve for the people around it, for the community it serves, until you have clarity around what that vision and mission is, you will not get the people on board, because you'll need to engage people's hearts. We need to actually speak emotionally to the team around us. So work out what we're here to achieve. What's the vision? What's the mission? What is it here to achieve? Because so often in small businesses, I say, yeah, I've brought this new manager on board. I've brought this new CEO on board. And I'm going to give them some shares. And that is not the ownership piece. It's not in their wallet. It's in their heart. I want to see employees who behave like they literally own the business before I give them shares. I want them to be thinking of ideas that grow and inspire and expand my business. I'm thinking ideas before I think of them. I want them thinking the same way that I think before I'm going to reward them by giving them a share in my business. So the ownership piece is, how do we find the right people and bring them into the business and inspire them in the right way that they come on board and own their own share of my business? I've walked into restaurants before now, spoken to the maitre d' and thought, and truly believed that it was his business. And only when I've dug in the background and had conversations, I found that somebody completely different owns the business, but the maitre d' was just so warm and so understanding of the business and its goals and why it was there. I thought it was their business. How do we create that with our own team? So for you as leaders and the leaders that you work with, what is your style naturally creating? Because as I say, management training has been missing for the last 20 years. It's really easy to fall into the style of managers that went before us or the people around us. Does your management style appear to create ownership and accountability and responsibility in the team? Does it allow the team members to stand up, have autonomy and create their ideal outcomes? Or do we go looking for blame, excuses and denial and regularly get those? Because that's an easy style to fall into. So the point here is to bring consciousness to that. What is the words we're going to say? that bring accountability and responsibility in that moment. So to dig into that a little bit further, started thinking about what are the qualities of a great leader. The greatest leaders I've worked with, they had passion, absolute passion for what they wanted to do, and they were prepared to be responsible to drive that forward. But also, they enrolled and inspired everybody along the way. The enroll and inspire piece is huge for a great leader, which means they were completely engaged and completely committed to the role and completely committed to the outcomes they wanted to achieve. And in order to do that, yes, they were decisive. There was no willingness, and they knew their subject matter, and they could communicate with great clarity what it is they wanted to achieve, and could help us to plan and drive towards that goal without variation, without moving away from what that goal is or losing focus. But also they were fun and personable. And I want to look back to that in a little bit. That fun and personable bit shows they had emotional intelligence and they were listening carefully. You see, running a great company requires both great management and great leadership. In my world, you can learn it, or you can hire it, or you can get coached in how to do it, or coach the team in how to do it. So if we've got tips for great managers, so what tips for great leaders? So what are the tips for great management? This is what we've worked out. And I sat down with Brad Sugars, the guy that set up ActionCOACH all those years ago, and we've worked through this over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. What are the key elements that work really, really well in management? And fundamentally, a weekly work in progress meeting is a fundamental skill. This comes out of books like Vern Harnish's Scaling Up and all the books that live up on the bookshelf there. That cadence of weekly meetings. The weekly work in progress meeting is a meeting where the whole team, the whole management team gets together and review what work is in progress in the business right now. It's the opportunity to spot the holes in communication and spot the opportunities where there's an overlap of what we're doing, and for everybody to get visibility. Remember, the purpose of a meeting is to communicate, not to make conclusions, not to make plans. The purpose of a meeting is to communicate what it is that we have in place for that week. The weekly work in progress meeting should take place kind of like on a Monday, beginning of the week. And I'd layer that up with another meeting that goes off on a Thursday called the Lion Meeting. We call it the Lion Meeting. The Lion Meeting is what happened last week, what issues arose, what opportunities arose, and what are we doing next week. And we do that on a Thursday because it allows us the Friday then to get the planning and the actions in place. So there's 2 weekly meetings that run. These are proactive meetings. Everybody in the management team and everybody in the organization knows these 2 meetings run every week. Which means when somebody comes to you knocking on the door with the problem they've got right now, your first response is always, can you bring it to the meeting? Can you bring it to the meeting becomes the great answer, straight out of the 1 Minute Manager, the most powerful management book there is at the moment. Can you bring it to the meeting? At which point they have to go away and consider how urgent it is, how important it is, what they're going to bring to the meeting, what will be said at the meeting, and can they get an answer themselves? Now, some things most definitely are the issues that have to be addressed in that moment. And when those questions arise, it's really important that as a great manager, you lean back on that employee and ask them, what are their thoughts? So many managers in the modern world want to be, what's the word? Superheroes. I worked with a printing guy over in Selby. And the guy, he was an absolute expert in setting up litho printers. He loved his litho printers. That was his passion in life. And his office overlooked the shop floor, and he had like a dozen of these big print machines running. And each of them had a little beacon on top of them. And if ever they stopped running, the beacon would flash. And this guy, he was called Iain as well, had leaped to his feet and he'd dash out of the office. The only thing he missed was actually drawing his cape on as he left the office, as he hurtled down the shop floor to go set that machine back up again and get it running, get production back up again. What did he teach his team every time he did that? What do you think he taught his team each time he stood up to do that and ran down the shop floor? Well, as I observed it, they learnt a number of things. The first thing they learnt was that Iain didn't trust them. He didn't trust them enough to set the machine up as well as he did. They were not worthy of setting that machine up. Only Iain was worthy of setting the machine up. And so there was a lack of trust, a lack of confidence, and a lack of, well, happiness at that moment. They also learned that if they wanted a smoke break, all they had to do was fold over the corner of a sheet of paper, and they get a 15-minute smoke break, because Iain would dash down the shop floor to turn that machine off and get it reset, and they could just go and have a quick smoke while they did it. They learned nothing at all. So the question is, the challenge is, when somebody comes to you with a question as a manager, your question is, so what 3 or 4 solutions do you have for this meeting? Let them what 3 or 4 solutions do you have for this question, for this challenge? What are your solutions? What have you thought about? How have you come to that? And then coach them through those solutions till they get to the point where you go, yes, that's what I'd do. Let them get on with it. Another tip to great management is a 20-60-80 rule, or the 20-80 rule, which is about delegation. You see, the challenge with delegation, and the challenge I find with so many business owners who don't want to delegate to their team because, well, the team have let them down so often, is they don't use the 20-60-20 rule. Imagine I'm giving Steve a job. It's Monday, and I'm going to give Steve a job that wants to be delivered on Friday. I talk to Steve about the job and hand him the task, hand him the role, hand him the KPIs and say, off you go. This is what I want you to do. If I want the job delivering on Friday, I'm going to check with him on Tuesday and ask what the progress is. Why Tuesday? Because I want to know that Steve actually heard he got the job. And I want Steve to communicate to me that he actually understood the job that I thought I gave to him. And I want to know that Steve actually got started on that job. And then another 60% of the way through the job, so 80% of the way through the job, on Thursday, I'm going to check in again. And I'm going to go, I'm getting on with that job. Obviously, by Thursday, I want the job, well, at least 80% complete. But if it's nowhere near 80% complete, at least I've got Friday to sort that out. Or Steve's got Friday to sort that out. Or Steve's got Friday to try and catch back up again. This is just a management technique which has got so much easier now that we've got some automation around us, and we can delegate a task and then just ask Siri or Google or whoever just to set as a reminder, just to call up, just make sure. Let's even send the email on a delayed send so we can check in with people, make sure that progress is being made. So delegating isn't just about passing a role on, but also checking up 20% in, 80% the way in. Make sure we're getting there. Another great management tape was walking around. Many years ago, we set a factory up in Poland. They were manufacturing components for the UK, which frequently were assembled incorrectly. And the only solution we could come up with, I run a war room on this for about 18 months, was we built a robotic assembly line to actually compile these components, put them together in the right order, and we knew that if the robot was building them, it was going to work well. And we weren't going to get the somewhat dangerous assembly faults we'd had. We set the robot up. The robot ran really, really well. And I was taking a walk around the shop floor in Poland some months later and noticed that behind the robot, there's a stack of boxes of part-made components. I would never have known about those part-made components, or known that the guys didn't believe the robot could keep up with work. So on a night shift, they were sitting behind the machine and assembling the damn things by hand because they actually believed they could work faster than the robot. So a percentage of those components were still going through as faulty. And for that business, that was mission critical. If I hadn't walked around, I would never have seen the boxes. And the first I would have learned that problem would have been when there'd been a failure on site. And those sites were safety critical. So sometimes walking around, we can see stuff that we wouldn't actually get from any other conversation. So another great tip to walk for great management is walking around. And the tips that are missing, there's so much missing in today's are the daily KPIs and a to-do list. Every member of my team has to complete at the end of the day a to-do list for tomorrow. I actually get them to WhatsApp me a photograph of their to-do list for tomorrow. The improvement I get in productivity by having somebody put a to-do list together for tomorrow is around about 30%. I put a to-do list together and send it to my coach every evening. And sometimes I put on that the KPIs of how many telephone calls I need to make tomorrow, how many decision makers I need to speak to tomorrow, how many coaching sessions do I have tomorrow. Those are the KPIs that keep me challenged and keep me moving forward. And I have the same for all my team, to keep that pressure on those guys, because that pressure ensures that they perform better. That's what great management looks like. And if you want to know any more about that stuff, it's all written in the 1 Minute Manager. These are all great, great tools. If that's what great management looks like, what does great leadership look like? In great leadership, it's important to remember that we're talking about leading individuals. It's so easy in the modern world to think we're leading a team, and we are not. We are leading a set of individuals. We need to know how each of those communicate. So we talk about DISC and VAC profiles. Their DISC profile, how they communicate. Their VAK, are they visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? Understanding their individuals. And God gave us two of these, and one of these. 2 ears and 1 mouth. Communicate in that order. But make sure that we do communicate. Keep that constant communication. Unless we've said something 21 times over and in various different styles, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, the team won't have heard it. That communication is about the big picture, where we're going to go, where we're going to drive this business to, what it's bringing to the community, what it's bringing to the environment, what it's bringing to the world around us, and how bright is our future. And listen to the feedback we get. Those are the tips for leadership. Just that little reminder that, I was away in Corfu recently, and I noticed that all the sailing ships, the steering wheel's at the back. That allows the captain of the boats to see everything in front of him, to see the horizon, see the weather coming in, see the hazards in front of them, but also to see everything that goes on that boat in front of them. Who's pulling on which line, who's setting the sail, and who's setting the anchor. All can be seen from the back of the boat. That is what leadership is about. It's about leading the ship. So where did we go with all this? We put all this together. We did all this work. We've studied this in some great detail. Where did we go with all this? Where we went with this, we finished up putting it together in a 12-week management training masterclass. The reason we did that was we couldn't find anything else in the marketplace that went through the basics of management that are needed in a practical environment right now. Something that's a short, sharp hit. Something which does some education and then drills down and gets people to revisit the education, to actually practice the stuff they learn, to build those neural pathways, to get things to stick and become habitual. And the areas of management we looked at that came really, really clear to us that needed developing was a conversation around what is management as opposed to what is leadership, as opposed to what is just being a friend with some people in the team. Then we start talking about managing competency. You see, management is about competency and about productivity. So how do we manage that competency? How do we manage productivity? We manage productivity by building daily lists. And when we've got a daily list in place, we then move people on to building a weekly list. And then we get on to weekly meetings. And when we've got the managers doing that, then we get them to do that with their teams. And once we've got teams building weekly, monthly, and daily lists, then we can start having one-to-one meetings with each of those team members to see how they're getting on with the goals and the KPIs that they will put in place for their role. Suddenly, this is not management by challenge. This is management supporting people to achieve the KPIs and the SMART goals that they set themselves. When people get that engaged, we give them then the tools for 90-day management, which allows them to set slightly longer term goals and build KPIs that drive them towards goals which are driving towards where we want the business to go. When we've got those KPIs and SMART goals in place and people understand what they are and they're working towards them, then the reviews and the personal development we have with them become that supportive conversation we have on a weekly basis. How are you doing those KPIs? How can I help you? What resource, what help, what training do you need in order for you to achieve those KPIs more effectively? And it becomes a supportive role. Sometimes it's going to go wrong, and then we need the communication skills, the tools to handle conflict. And we talk about conflict handling and communication skills, DISC and VAC, in week 10. Then we talk about how to build effective teams, and then we look at that movement then, or what happens when we get that manager moving up in the management train. Those are what we've drawn out in the course of the last few years, looking at what management needs to be and why management stands aside from leadership in the environment going forward. And if you jump on that QR code, that'll take you to the landing page around that management training course, so you can learn more about that and drop me a line to learn some more detail. When I work with businesses on this, we see a massive improvement in the productivity and the competency of the managers and their team around them. That's what we're here to achieve. So guys, in terms of where we are, that's all I wanted to run through with you guys today. That's probably my 46 minutes of what I want to talk about. I have been Iain Strahan. I'm the business coach operating out of Leeds, and we're delivering all these training courses and this benefit to business. If you want to jump on that QR code, grab 20 minutes with me. If you know a company that has a challenge like this, or you have a company with challenges that we might have spoken about today, drop me a quick line. I'd love to have a coffee with you and talk it through. See whether our management training is useful to you, or whether I can direct you to one of the books on my bookshelf up here, which would help you to drive that forward in a different way. I'm always open to a conversation. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say, I've been Iain Strahan. You've been absolutely great to have on the call today. Thank you so much for being here. Jump on that QR code, grab a conversation. And I do look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Very much indeed, guys.